Hello friends, I hope everyone is doing well and welcome to the latest plant chat with Kat. It's been a while, so let me reintroduce myself. My name is Kat, or better known as Catherine, and I am a real estate agent with the Saba team at Compass. And one of my favorite things to do, aside from finding people beautiful homes, is sharing my love for plants and gifting plants. And so one of the most interesting things that I've been doing is kind of just, I get to be in different homes all the time, and I really start feeling like, oh my God, I could throw a plant here, I could throw a plant there, I could do this and that. And I found it so soothing to decorate spaces with plants. And so what best way to do that than to gift a plant from my own garden to somebody? So along with that, today we'll be talking about what plants are best for people who either have never owned plants or don't have the best setup for plants. So in New York City, you either have the perfect apartment with the perfect exposures and just plenty of light everywhere you look, but more often than not, you get a railroad apartment or an apartment with a few windows here and there. So you gotta figure out, how am I gonna decorate this space and make it look as homey as possible? Plants have such a way of bringing a home together. And so I want to focus today on plants that are really easy for first-time plant parents, or even better, plants that are really easy for people with no lights. People with no lights. Well, you get what I mean, people with low light, right? So I'm going to talk about the top 5 plants I own. Not the only plants that are low light, but the top 5 plants that I own that are commonly gifted because it's a new parent, or it's a parent that's not going to really be very mindful, or maybe you have a busy schedule, or you just don't have that much great light. These 5 plants are best for any of those situations. And so they are the ones that give me the most babies as well. And so let's get started. I'll start with one of my favorites, and that'll be Pothos, right? So Pothos, I have plenty of. I have babies crawling all over the place with Pothos. And that's because I have in this little corner the best south. So this is facing south. And so I have light pretty much all day long as the sun travels through the front of the building. Now in the back, I have zero light. The next room, so this is a railroad setup, right? So you have this beautiful bright room, and then you have a dark living room, a bathroom with no window, a kitchen with no windows, and then the back room that faces north and is less light there. So with such a beautiful setup, I definitely think it's very important to have these low light plants, because otherwise you end up with just one corner of your home filled with plants, and then you can't show them off. I like to show my plants off. So these are the guys that end up being in the dark rooms. So this is your standard Pothos, nothing too thrilling about it, but let me tell you, they are definitely growers. So here we have, this is what happens to a plant in lower light. And this isn't anything bad, by the way. This is good. This is a green, just plain green leaf. And so the less sun it gets, the less variegation it gets, because it actually wants that variegation for this particular Pothos, right? Some of them have these little patterns on them. And so the more light they get, the more they do these things. But the less light they get, the more they look a little bit like this, which is totally fine. Just changes the variegation. Another reason I love to gift this plant is because it'll scream at you when it's ready for water. This is it screaming at me for not giving it water. Now I've already given it water, so you'll see a good portion of it is doing fine, but the back is kind of just like, and yeah, it's just letting me know I'm not feeling good, girl. So I gave it some water and it's gonna be better. But that's just what happens with Pothos. So another reason I like them for new plant parents is that they'll let you know, like, hey, it's time. So Pothos are a very common plant. And one thing I want to do is I want to spice up the home with something that's not so common, right? So I do this beautiful arrangement of plants that I gift that have 3 kinds of Pothos. And the reason I'm able to mix them in the same pot is because they require the same care. So this is to ensure that, you know, like if I were to put this and say a succulent, that'd be a pretty dumb idea because they just need different care. Pothos, these are 3 different kinds of pothos that need the same exact care. So this is the marble queen that I showed you earlier. Then this is the a neon pothos. And so in lower light, it just loses a little bit of that lime color, but it still does perfectly well. And then a Skindapsis right here. So Skindapsis is a different kind of pothos. It doesn't require a whole lot of sunlight, but the more sunlight it gets, the more it gets these silvery spots. So for example, this one has been in the light all along. This one has been in the darker rooms. And so you'll see, obviously it's more so because it's a smaller pot, but it's still been growing really, really well. And this pothos here, this satin pothos is actually doing really well with its variegation for not being in the sun and all. So this one is going to go to a beautiful new home soon. And that is how I kind of spice things up with pothos. And whenever I gift those, we're losing a little bit of the light because it's getting darker out. But so that's one. Then the next one that I think is the perfect gift for anyone is a snake plant. So it's definitely beautiful. It's really easy to care for. I forget about this guy so often, and truly it's crazy just how well it does. You could forget to water it. You could leave it in a darker room and it'll do okay. Now, one thing that's really important to remember is no plant needs no light. That is false. They still need a little bit of light. So every once in a while, I do have to rotate it, bring it back into this room and let it get a little bit of light. But most often it's actually hanging out in my living room, in the dark room, and it's doing great. Now the way I would gift this plant is I would actually go and purchase one or remove them, divide them, like actually pull this out and create a new plant. I just feel like it looks a little plain on its own. And so I would go ahead and buy one if I'm going to gift it, just because if you don't split it that way, then you cut it or you wait for pups to grow. And here's the thing. I have pups that grew, but imagine receiving this gift. I don't know if it does much for your home, right? So I got to give these a little bit more time to grow. They are slow growers. And so if you're getting them for decoration purposes, for decorative purposes, then I would say just make sure you get a larger plant if you want it more for decoration. Otherwise, it's going to grow, but it's going to grow really slow, but still great for low light situations. Next, and this plant I gift quite often. I'll show you the children that are living in the dark. And then I'll show you the plant, the parent plant. And actually, I'm lying. These guys are in a little bit more light than the parent. And so the reason for that is because the newer sprouts or the cuttings need a little bit more humidity and a little bit more light in the beginning than the parent plant. Once they're nice and strong, they'll do just fine. So these are cuttings from the parent plant that I'm about to show you. And these are ZZ plants, and they are totally fine with low light. They are also they do really well if you forget to water them. So we'll do a little close up here. Hopefully you can see it a little better. But if you could see, like this one's all sucked up and dry, but this one's a little thicker. Now what happens is because this was the cutting, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes the original cutting will die out. But it's good news that we have new growth. And that's for both of these guys. They've both been doing really well. And they actually came from this girl over here, who's in a low light situation pretty consistently. She's gotten way bigger since you've last seen her. So if you want more specific tips on how to care for these guys, go to my previous plant chat, and I have a little care tip on this one. I have one for everything except for the snake plant that I showed you, because that's a little bit of a newer addition to my collection. But these guys are just huge. And the reason you could forget to water them is because they actually have rhizomes, which are little bulbs at the bottom, and they actually maintain most of the moisture within it so that I don't have to water this except maybe every 3 weeks, sometimes a little bit more, but they'll let you know in terms of like how they start drying up, because otherwise they're like nice and juicy and thick. But that's a ZZ plant for you. Now, one key point I'm going to make about all of these plants is that because all of these plants need some type of light to grow, what ends up happening is sometimes we forget about them and we stop cleaning them. We stop dusting them. And that's not good, because if it's in a low light situation, the only way it's getting its food is through its leaves. It's photosynthesizing, right? And if it has dust on them, it's having a harder time getting all the nutrients from the little light it's getting, right? So you always want to just dust them. You always just want to clean them a little bit, especially when they're in a lower light situation, because you got to compensate for that. This guy is a rubber tree. This is another one you want to make sure you're always wiping down, and it's really easy to grow a new one. So this leaf here is actually how this plant started. The parent plant is right over here, and this one is constantly in lower light. It's doing great, but you'll see the difference. This came out of a leaf from here. So it's done amazingly. And then this is the parent. So you'll see this one just has a little bit better light, better color. It's a little shinier, and that's just because I care for it more, truly. Sometimes I forget about my babies in the back room, and you know, they just need a little more love. But they're also easy in terms of letting you know when they're thirsty, because you'll see some curling this way. They're very foldable in all directions, and so that's when you know it's time to have a sip, because these are just a little bit thicker, sturdier. But otherwise, these are amazing for low light. I know rubber trees are not everyone's plant, but they're super cute, and they could get huge. So it's definitely a beautiful long-term plant and decorates a lot of spaces really beautifully and in like a subtle way. So that's another one of the guys that I think are perfect for low light situations. So we've talked about pothos, we've talked about ZZ, snake plant, and rubber tree. The last one I want to talk about, which is, I think, the biggest success story, this gorgeous Aglaonema. Another common name for it is Chinese evergreen. So I just need you to look at that leaf. And it's just a gorgeous plant. So in the beginning of the pandemic, I was going to my office to go and check on the plants, believe it or not, to make sure that the plants would be getting enough water, enough just care. And when I went into the office, I saw the parent to this plant just hanging out in a corner with 0 windows. And it was just surviving on the office lights, I suppose. It would droop down the way this one's drooping down. I've already watered it, don't worry, but it was really thirsty. So same thing, they'll just droop when they're ready to drink. But they would look like that, and then I'd water them, and they'd be so much better after without sun. So if that's not living proof that these are low light plants, I don't know what is. It's a wonderful, beautiful, beautiful plant. I do love it so much. I have not named this guy, but I have a video of it if you're interested in care tips for it. And I have a different variation of this Aglaonema, or an Aglaonema, in the back. And so you'll see a little bit more of that. But that's it, guys. Those are the 5 plants. And remember, they're not the only plants that are low light, but they are the main plants that I have and gift most often because they make babies quick. They also, minus the snake plant, they also are just very low maintenance and really easy to care for. Now, maybe next time I'll cover the high maintenance, crazy plants that are great for a lot of light. But for this moment, thank you for tuning in for this latest plant chat. I hope to see you guys soon. And I also hope to send you guys plenty more videos. So if you have any ideas for me, or if you need any help in particular with any plant suggestions, I'm so happy to hear them. And other than that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and Take care.